everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sonia, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants aims to inspire the next generation by bringing science, exploration, adventure, and conservation into classrooms all over the world through live streams just like this. Today, we're so lucky to be joined by Teresa from the Turtle Hospital in the Florida Keys. Since 1986, the Turtle Hospital has been rehabilitating injured sea turtles and returning them to their natural habitat. They also educate the public through outreach programs and are going to talk to us today about what they do and some of the turtles that they're helping right now. Turtles are one of my all-time favorite creatures, so I am very excited, and I'm sure all the classrooms joining us here today live and through our YouTube stream are also very excited. So without further ado, Teresa, I am going to hand it over to you. Hello.
Hi. We love being able to teach people about our sea turtles. Because we know that down here in the Florida Keys that we are very lucky in that we get to hang out with these turtles all the time. But
All
that
right. We're so
a lot
excited.
of other people don't have that opportunity.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So we're going to start off with one of our larger patients today. This is Charlie. Charlie's about a 175-pound green sea turtle. So the green sea turtles are one of the more common species that we get down here in the Keys. And really neat thing about them is that they're called the green turtles. But if you notice, he's not exactly green. Well, how does he get his name? Well, green sea turtles are primarily herbivores. So they eat lots of seagrass and algae. And they eat so much of that green stuff that their fat, their insides, turn green. So it's kind of like you are what you eat. Colors. But Charlie came in first of the month, so about 2 weeks ago. He was found floating and entangled on one of his flippers. But the entanglement wasn't that bad, but it gave the rescuers a chance to be able to catch him and bring him into us because he also has tumors, which is a virus that sea turtles get, primarily found in the sea turtles, in the green sea turtles, and it's called Papilloma. We tend to call it FP for short, but it's caused by water pollution. But it causes tumors to grow on their soft tissues. So their neck, their flippers, their eyes, which makes it very hard for these turtles to see or to swim. And so he does have a bunch of small tumors on his eyes, on his neck, around his flippers. But we've already done surgery once. We've removed a 6-pound tumor off of his rear flipper, which he was very happy to get that off. One of the larger sized tumors we've ever seen. So now he just has to recuperate for a couple more weeks. Then we'll be able to do surgery again, remove some more of his tumors. And then once he is tumor free, he'll stay with us for at least a few months, give us a chance to make sure that he's completely healthy, that he builds up the antibodies, builds up an immunity to that virus. So when he gets released, he won't ever get those tumors again. But the other cool thing about Charlie is that he also has scrape marks all over the back of his shell. And that's most likely from a shark, because that shell is their main protection from predators. So when they're getting attacked by a shark, they'll twist and they'll turn. They'll keep their back or their belly to the shark because it's a lot harder for the shark to bite them that way. Think about trying to pinch your hand. You can get the side of your hand a lot better than you can the palm of your hand. And luckily, all he got was a few scrapes. Didn't end up missing any bits of his shell or any bits of his flippers, which is always a very good thing. But we'll let Charlie take his little nap, and we'll talk about Chomper, who is also kind of taking a nap right now. But that's okay. Nap time is very important when you're sick. In a lot of ways, they're like us, in that when you get sick, you get very weak and tired, and you sleep a lot. Well, same thing for the turtles. And then as they start feeling better, then they start eating better, start getting more and more active, and we can kind of use that as an indicator as to how they're doing. So Chomper here. Now, first off, Chomper is a loggerhead. They're the other common species that we get. The loggerheads get their name because they have that very, very large head. And they use that large head to crush their food. They eat crab, lobster, conch, anything with a hard shell. And don't know if you've ever tried it, but trying to bite into a lobster, not exactly very easy. So they have a very strong beak, lots of muscles to be able to do that. But Chomper came in also because of tumors, which is kind of crazy because it's not very often that we see loggerheads with tumors. But it does happen. And unfortunately, with Chomper, his tumor was the largest tumor we had ever seen. It was 14 pounds. It's the size of a basketball, larger than his head. It was attached to his right front flipper. And unfortunately, it had caused so much damage that we had to amputate that right front flipper. But that's why it's all bandaged up right now. But that's okay. He'll still be able to be released. As long as they have 3 flippers, they can live a totally normal life. Think of a 3-legged dog. They may look a little bit different, but still do everything perfectly fine. They just have to learn how to adapt. And so it's only been, just about 2 weeks since that surgery. So he's still healing. We'll give him probably at least another month or so before we do surgery again and start removing some of his other tumors. But really, the most important part was to get rid of that really, really big one. Because with that thing on him, he couldn't move. At least not very well. And trying to pull him out of the water was not very fun. Imagine something the size of a basketball weighing 14 pounds attached to you. Do not suggest it. But he's taken a little nap, and he's kind of funny because he's got his head stuck in the corner there. And that's kind of the way that sea turtles sleep. They cannot pull their heads and their flippers inside their shell like a box turtle can. Their heads and their flippers are always out. So when it is time for them to sleep, they want to protect themselves. So they go tuck their head up underneath a rock or a ledge, under a reef, in a corner, pretty much anywhere that they can to protect that head. So that way, in the wild, it is pretty good camouflage because they just kind of look like a rock. But pretty much, they think that if they can't see us, that we can't see them. And pretty much all of them do it. Most of them do it right up against the edges of the tank. They also like to hang out right there at where the water comes in because it feels good. It's like the jet of a hot tub. That's why we like going in hot tubs. But one of the kind of really neat things about us is that we are located right on the ocean. It's one of the perks of being on an island is that we have a lot more ocean than we do land, which is why we have so many sea turtles. And so typically it's the boaters and the fishermen, so the people that are out there on the water that see these turtles. They notice that something is just not right, so they call us. One of our rehab staff is always on call, so they get in their ambulance and they go pick that turtle up. Or if the boat is close enough, they can drop it right here into our docks. And then sort of as a thank you for them rescuing that turtle, then they get to name it. That's why some of our turtles have some very interesting names. But the turtles, they don't know what their names are. They don't care. The names are really just for us. Because like this guy, this is Con Leche. So little juvenile green. She's only about 15 pounds. Now she did come in with tumors, but she's now tumor free. She's doing awesome, but we still want to keep an eye on her for at least a couple more months. Make sure that those tumors aren't going to come back, and then we'll let her go. So right now she's just kind of living it up. doesn't have to worry about predators or finding her own food or anything like that. And that is ultimately our goal, is to release as many of these turtles as we can. But we're not going to release them if they can't survive on their own. So when that happens, they become non-releasable and they get to hang out here. We have this 160,000 gallon saltwater tidal pool for our non-releasables to live in. So it is connected directly to the ocean because, as you saw, the ocean's not very far away. But because it is tidal, it has a natural rocky sandy bottom, and there's also fish. So it's pretty much as natural as we can make it. Just because they have to be in captivity forever doesn't mean they have to be in a little tiny tank forever. So most of these guys are non-releasable because it's known as bubble butt syndrome, which is and it causes nerve damage, which means that these turtles now float. And floating in a sea turtle is not normal. You cannot release a floating sea turtle, so they have to stay here. But we do try to keep them a little bit more comfortable. So while they're here, we attach lead weight to the outside of their shells. So that's why a lot of these guys, you'll see these kind of gray circles on their butts. Those are weights. So that way when they want to, at the bottom, that eventually the weights fall off. So even with the weights, they still cannot be released. Because once you release a sea turtle, they're not ever coming back, especially not for a checkup. But even though bubble butt's the most common reason to stay, it's not the only reason. So like this guy, this is Montel. He's named after the talk show host because he came in with a lot of drama. He's been hit by a boat, bit by a shark, entangled in fishing line, and he's had tumors. So he's missing half of his right front flipper, all of his left front flipper, his right eye, and his shell is dented on his left side.
Hey, Teresa, we're losing you a little bit. It seems to be cutting out a bit. I don't know if you're able to move a little closer to the tanks at the beginning. We had a really clear. Hi, everyone. We seem to have lost connection with Teresa, but I think she's just going to reload it, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Hi, Teresa.
Okay, am I back? Be out there for.
Yes, I can hear you now. Oh. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Teresa?
Yes.
Okay,
Kick me out
perfect.
there for a minute.
No problem. Our screen is a little frozen. I don't know if there's a different spot that you could move to. That's a bit closer.
Let's try. Is that better?
Yes, we can see more of a movement.
Well, yeah,
All right.
April's also sitting at the bottom at the moment.
Okay.
April's blind. He doesn't always know what's going on.
All right. I will, you can jump back in.
Okay. So, one of the really great things about having such a large pool like this is that we can put the turtles together, but really, the turtles don't always care. Sea turtles in the wild, they are solitary, so they do not travel in groups. So the movie Finding Nemo lied. They don't meet their parents, they don't go traveling the currents together. So that's why when we need to keep them by themselves, especially when they first come in and they're sick, they're okay with that because they're used to being by themselves. They don't get lonely. The only time they're ever with other turtles is during mating or right when they're first hatching. But then once they make it to the ocean, they aren't with their brothers and sisters anymore. So they're used to being by themselves. And then even when we do put them together, like in the main pool there, they tend to just ignore each other. So they'll steal food from each other, they'll knock into each other, but they're not mean, but they're not exactly friends either. They just don't care. Tends to keep it a little fun. But we'll go to our smallest little guys, which we don't have any babies right now because nesting season is May through October. Typically takes about 50 to 60 days for those eggs to hatch. And then once they hatch out, they swim offshore. But we get the babies when they don't make it to the ocean. So sometimes they'll get stuck at the bottom of their nest or they get distracted by lights and end up going the wrong direction. But we've already released all of our babies for this year because all of our nests have all hatched. All of our babies were all healthy. So they all got let go. So we only have, this is our smallest one. This is Ethel. And then we also have her sister Lucy, just because names are fun. Now these are year-old loggerheads. So when she grows up, she'll look like Chomper up there. But that's probably 15, 20 years down the road. She's only a baby so far. But she's what we call our Head Start program, which means that she's going to stay with us till she's about 2 years old. So just about another year, give her a chance to get a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot healthier. So that way when she does get released, she'll have a much better chance of survival because she'll be a lot bigger. Not as many things will want to eat her. She'll still have to be careful, but at least she'll have a better chance. It's estimated about 1 out of 600 of those little itty bitty hatchlings will make it for the first 2 years. So we're going to help that chance a little bit. Plus, she already helped us. As a hatchling, she was part of a study up at Florida Atlantic University. They're trying to figure out how many girls and how many boys are being born. Because with sea turtles, that all depends on the temperature of the nest. The warmer the nest, the more girls. The cooler the nest, the more boys. Because hot chicks, cool dudes. That's how you remember. And so we've been finding over the past, I think, close to 10 years, almost 100% of the babies that they've tested have been female, which is not really a good thing for long-term survival of the species. So kind of next step is to try to figure out ways to kind of tweak the temperature of the nest. But because she helped us, it's our turn to help her. So she's going to stay till she's a bit bigger. And for at least right now, she does have a few toys. That's what those PVC pipes are. Those are toys. They're not going to play fetch the way you might think of other playing with animals, but they're going to hide under it or scratch their shell up against it because they do have nerve endings throughout their shell. Think about rubbing your fingernail. That's what they feel. But good thing about sea turtles is that because they are solitary, they never meet their moms and dads. So they never have that parent to teach them what to do. It's all instinct. It's ingrained in them from the moment they're born. They're on their own. So even being raised in captivity, they still know what to do because they're born with that knowledge. So being raised the first 2 years here, it's not like she'll need a class or to be taught how to survive. She'll be great. And she'll be a little bit bigger. She'll kind of have that jump start on everybody else. So she'll have a nice, long, turtly awesome life. Okay, we want to do some questions?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Teresa. That was awesome. I am going to start bringing up our classrooms that are joining us live so that they can ask you questions. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, we're going to start with Miss Segal's grade 2 class.
Hello. Our question is, how does garbage in the ocean affect sea turtles? That's from one of my grade 2 students.
Yeah, well, any sort of garbage or trash, litter, anything that ends up in the ocean that's not supposed to be there causes a lot of problems. Some of it, these turtles get entangled in, especially being down here in the Keys. There's a lot of fishing and things going on down here. And so if they get entangled in that fishing line, think about it. They don't have fingers. They don't have thumbs. They can't unentangle themselves. So if they get wrapped around so tightly, especially around one of those flippers, they can cut off the circulation. It'll cause us to have to amputate a flipper. And of course, there's always the risk of drowning. But even if they decide to eat it, sea turtles, they know what they're supposed to eat, but they can't always tell the difference between what's trash and what's food. Especially things like plastic bags and balloons, because floating in the water, they end up looking like jellyfish. Sea turtles love jellyfish. And so they eat it thinking it's food, and then it gets stuck in their intestines and it makes them sick. And so that's when they have to come in. And unfortunately, sea turtles, they can't make appointments. They don't know they have to go to the doctor. So it's kind of our job to help find them and to bring them in. Plus, it's our job just to help prevent that stuff from getting into the ocean in the first place. And at least there's lots of options available. You can take your reusable bags to the store. They have the reusable water bottles instead of those single-use plastics. So it's just being aware that things have a life once they're out of your sight. They don't just magically disappear once you kind of throw it away.
Awesome. That's great information to have. Thank you for that question from our grade 2s. Next, we're going to visit Miss McDonald's virtual grade 1 class for a question.
All right. So, Sebastian, did you want to ask your question? You turn your microphone and ask it yourself.
Why turtles are slow?
So I'm not sure if you heard his question. He said he wants to know why turtles are slow.
Well, they're only slow when they want to be. They can do bursts of speed up to about 30 miles an hour, but they can't maintain that speed. But think about you. If you sprinted, you could sprint really fast. That's Brianna waking up there. So they can move fast, but just like you can sprint fast, but you're not going around all day, every day at a flat out run. That would be exhausting. So what they're going to do instead is just kind of walk and go very gentle until they absolutely have to be fast. But yeah, Brianna there, she's one of our non-releasable turtles. She's got bubble butt. And she's a loggerhead. So when little Ethel grows up, she'll look like Brianna.
That's awesome. Thank you for your question, Miss McDonald's class. We're going to jump over to Miss Bannock's class for a question.
Evelyn, come on up.
Hello.
Hi, come on over here. All right, go ahead, sweetheart. Say it in a big voice.
Is it illegal to catch a turtle in your net?
Yes. Well, because sea turtles, they are endangered species. So they are protected under federal law. So you're not allowed to kill, harm, harass, or interfere with them in any way. There are exceptions. So like here, we have a permit. So we are allowed to take care of these turtles. And so when people find these turtles out there on the water, we can give them permission over the phone. Like when they call us saying, hey, I found this turtle. Now what? We can give them permission to get that turtle on their boat. So we're giving them permission, the okay, to take care of that turtle and to transport it in here to us. And there are exceptions, like if you're out there fishing and you accidentally hook that turtle, because especially these loggerheads, because they like to eat meat, crab, and conch and lobsters and all that, they'll sometimes go after your bait. So if you accidentally hook a turtle, then yes, you're okay to help it, but you can't just go out there and catch one because you want to, or go out there, if you're out there snorkeling or diving, you can't go up to a turtle and start petting it. That's a big no-no. One, because it is illegal, and two, because they are a wild animal. There's always a possibility that they will turn around and bite you. That's always a kind of a good thought with wild animals, is that if they have teeth, that's always a possibility. And especially something that can bite through a conch, that won't work out too well with your fingers. So yeah, hands off of sea turtles unless you have permission.
Awesome. Great question. Mr. Koskinski's class, grade 2s, we're heading over to you for a question.
Thanks so much. I have two of my students, Riley and Melody, who were interested in what type of foods and medicines are you giving them while they're being treated when they're staying with you?
Well, it all depends on the turtle. Just like with people, you get treated differently if you have a broken arm versus a cold. Same thing with the turtles. So turtles like Ethel here, she's completely healthy. We're just keeping her till she gets bigger, so she's not really on any meds, but she gets little bits of squid and fish and shrimp because she's not quite big enough yet to be handling the crab and the lobster. Whereas the green sea turtles, those are the herbivores. So in the wild, they eat the seagrass and the algae. Here, they get romaine, lettuce, kale, green peppers, cucumbers, occasionally broccoli. Sometimes some of the turtles like broccoli, but some of them not so much. And then the meds all depends on the turtle. So we have turtles like Chomper. Chomper was the one that had that 14-pound tumor. Chomper's a mess. And Chomper has now started to eat. He's getting big bits of fish and squid. And it looks like he's still napping. But he's not eating all that great yet. He's gone through a lot in the past few weeks. So we're also supplementing him with IV nutrition, making sure that he's still getting all the nutrients and everything that he needs, even if he's not actually eating it. And then, of course, he's on antibiotics and fluids and vitamins just to get him strong. And we do that with any of our turtles because when they first come in, all the same things happen when we first go to the doctor. They do get a physical, so we can look at them, but also they get blood work and x-rays, everything we can do to figure out what's wrong. So that way, if they do need extra vitamins or fluids or anything, we can do that because they can't exactly tell us how they're feeling.
That's awesome. We have 2 more classes that have joined us live that we're going to visit for questions, and then people viewing from YouTube. I'm seeing some great questions coming in, so I will head to some of those after. We're going to go to Ms. Wafer's virtual class today.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Teresa, for all you do. We are a virtual school, and we have students all over the world. So we have a couple of questions about babies. Olivia is in Nevada. She's in 4th grade, and she's wondering how many babies turtles have when they have babies. And Amber is in New Jersey in 6th grade and wondering, do they have the babies in the tank that they're in, or do you put them somewhere else?
Okay, well, sea turtles lay typically about 100 eggs per nest. And so sea turtles will always return to the same beach that they were hatched from to lay their own eggs. And so like turtles like Chuck and Chomper here, these are still what we consider subadults. So they're kind of like teenagers, they're not big enough yet. In order to be an adult, they have to be bigger than Charlie here. Charlie's just on the little line in between subadult and adult, so he's 175 pounds. So that's kind of give you an idea of how big they have to be able to lay eggs. And of course they have to be a girl, and we don't know yet if Charlie's a girl or a boy. You can't really tell until they hit adulthood, and then you can tell by the length of the tail, because the boys have long tails, girls have short tails. But they return to the same beach that they were hatched from, and they'll typically come up in the middle of the night where it's nice and dark, there's less predators, and then they'll dig a hole, drop the eggs, cover it up, and then go back out to the ocean, and that's it. They're done. That is the extent of their parental care. So it's kind of a trade-off. You got to have a lot of babies, but that's all you got to do. Or you can kind of be like us and have a few babies, but spend 18 years with them. But because they do return to the same beach that they were hatched from, they cannot breed here. We can't allow them to lay eggs here, because even if we were to give them the most perfect beach, the best beach in the entire world, they know that it's not their beach. And they're very, very stubborn animals. So they just won't lay. And so unfortunately, we just can't allow them to mate or to breed while they're here.
All right, and we have Miss Peltana's class that I'm going to add into the stream for some questions.
Hi. My class had 2 questions. We wanted to know how old Charlie is, what the oldest turtle you have is, if you can tell us anything about lifespans. And,
okay.
Yeah, and then if Charlie is a boy or a girl.
Okay, so for Charlie, we don't know if she's a boy or a girl yet. They have to be adulthood, so typically about 20 to 30 years old. Once Charlie gets a little bit bigger, if Charlie tail starts to grow, then we'll know Charlie's a boy. But if it still stays nice and little and doesn't go past the end of Charlie's shell, then Charlie is a girl. But we probably won't ever find that out. Charlie will be released before we determine that. But it doesn't really affect Charlie's care in any way, so that's okay. But average lifespan is about 70 to 100 years. And that's a pretty long time. And so they don't have growth rings like a tree. So you never know exactly how old they are, but sea turtles never stop growing. So the older the turtle, the larger they are. So you know that Charlie here is older than Chomper, because Chomper's only 100 pounds. So Chomper's probably about, still a teenager, 15 to 20 years old. Charlie's probably only about 20, 25 years old, because he's right there on that little cusp of adulthood. And then our biggest turtle is Bowie. She is one of the turtles in our big pool. She's one of our non-releasable turtles. She's about 315 pounds. Because she's one of our turtles that have bubble butt. but I don't see her up at the top right now. She must be hiding. But green sea turtles will eventually get to be about 500 pounds. So very large. But typically the rule of thumb is the bigger they are, the older they are.
That's amazing. I didn't know that they get that big. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to our classes joining us live, we have a bunch more watching on YouTube. So I'm going to pull a few of their questions, if that's all right, Teresa.
Sounds good. I like questions.
So I have a question from a virtual 6-7 class, and they're asking how many turtles get released each year from the turtle hospital?
Well, it varies. All depends on how many turtles we get in that year. Typically every year we get in about 100 turtles. Typically able to release about 70%. This year, it's been kind of a slower year, which is not a bad thing. This year we've gotten in 65 turtles so far, which we're good with that. And then we've been able to release, 39, I think? Because a good chunk of them were ones that came in last year. But it all depends on the turtle as to what's wrong with them, as to how long they need to stay. Because if they have a boat strike, that's going to take longer than if they just have eaten trash and are constipated.
Awesome. We have another question from Bishop Grishuk, grade 4 class. And their question was, how do the sea turtles get the tumors that you were showing us before?
It's caused by water pollution. So especially with these juvenile greens, these are the turtles that live near shore in the seagrass beds, which is where the water pollution, the runoff, is the greatest. Plus, they're eating the seagrass. The seagrass are kind of the natural filter for the ocean. So they take in the polluted water, clean it up, and kind of release the cleaner water. And then these turtles come along and eat that now polluted seagrass, which just kind of weakens their immune system enough to allow those tumors to grow. Like this guy, this is Birdie. So when Birdie came in, she was covered in tumors. That was back in April. So she was a mess. Tumors on both of her eyes, all over her neck, all over her flippers. So it was really, really hard for her to swim or to even see. But now, that was April. Now it's been just about 6 months. So now she's doing much better. She is tumor-free now, but we just want to keep her a little while longer, make sure that those tumors aren't going to come back, and then she'll be able to go home.
I saw some clapping from our classes. Go Birdie. Looking good.
That's one of the best parts of the job, is watching these turtles when they come in and they look horrible, because nobody looks their best when they're sick. Like, you don't be taking glamour shots from the hospital. And then by the time they get released, most of the time it's like they're a completely different turtle. And it's just amazing how far they've come.
That's so awesome. I have another question from a YouTube class, and it's Miss Ryan's grade 6 class, and they asked, how deep can sea turtles go underwater?
That kind of depends on the species. Most of the turtles are going to stay relatively shallow, so within about 200 feet, because that's where their food is. Because the greens are going to stay where there's plants. So they're not going to be in the deep oceans where there's no light, because plants kind of need light. Same thing with the loggerheads. They're going to stay where the crab and lobsters are. So within that first 200 feet. Now the leatherbacks. Now we do not have a leatherback. Leatherbacks are the largest of the turtles. Those are the ones that get to be 2,000 pounds. So the size of a small car, which is why it's a good thing we don't currently have them. But they spend most of their lives offshore because they like the deeper water. Leatherbacks can dive to depths up to about 4,000 feet. And they do that to follow their food. Their diet is primarily jellyfish. So the jellyfish travel up and down in the water column. So the leatherbacks are going to follow them. and even diving to 4,000 feet and back up. Leatherbacks can hold their breath about an hour and 15 minutes, which is crazy.
We also had a few classes ask if turtles like being around people. I know you guys are rehabilitating them to send them back into their natural habitat, but how is the interaction when you do have them with you?
Well, it depends on whether they're a patient or whether they're non-releasable. Because when they're a patient, like Conleche here, we don't want them to get too accustomed to people, because we want to make sure that when they get released, that she's not going to have any problems. Because the last thing we would want is for her to get released and then for her to go hang around people and get hit by a boat or get injured because she's now likes people. But typically for the patients, that's not a problem, because think about all the reasons why you don't like going to the doctor. Same thing with these turtles. We're the ones that are doing wound care. We're giving them shots. We're drawing blood. So all the not fun stuff to make sure that we stay healthy. So by the time that they get released, they don't like us, which is a good thing. That means they're going to get released. They're going to stay as far away from people as possible because they don't want to end up here again. Whereas the non-releasable turtles, these guys we can get a little bit more comfortable with just because they will always depend on people. But that being said, they never lose that wild instinct. So they never truly become tame, but you can train them to come for food. And that's primarily because it's food. You can't really train them for any other reason other than food. Kent is coming up right now because Kent thinks that I have food. Kent is kind of a food hog in that way. But that's okay. We love her anyways.
That's awesome. All right, we have a few more questions from our live classes before we have to wrap up, unfortunately. So I'm going to head back to Mr. K's class for some questions.
Hey, thanks so much. For my students, we're always looking to make those connections of, if I were to choose to do something like this in the future, what do I study when I go to school? Like, what should I be really good at if I want to help out animals like this in the future?
Okay, well, definitely your wheelhouse has to be math and science. Those are the two really important things. Most of us here have a degree in something science, whether that's biology, marine biology, environmental science. The actual degree is not always the most important, but because that just kind of gives you that foundation, because they don't typically teach sea turtle rehab at college. It's a lot of on-the-job training, but you kind of have to know the basics to kind of build on that. And then, of course, best thing is to have a passion for turtles, because if you don't like turtles, maybe working at the turtle hospital is not the best idea. But pretty much the best advice that I could give anybody is to volunteer. Intern as much as possible, because one, that gives you the experience needed, so that way when you do graduate, it's much more likely for you to get a job. And two, it does help you decide if you actually like doing it. A lot of times people have kind of a glorified idea of what we do. Like, hey, I get to go work at the turtle hospital. I get to go play with turtles all day. Well, yeah, that is part of it, but it's also being outside for a good chunk of the day, because that's where the turtles are, dealing with cleaning tanks and turtle poop. Not the most glamorous parts that we don't always publicize, but it's one of the things of working with animals. You got to get real used to poop.
All right, we're going to get one final question from Ms. Segal's grade 2 class.
Awesome. This is from my other grade 2 class who is watching from YouTube. Why do sea turtles live in salt water? That is one of the grade 2 questions.
You're on mute.
Well, because there's turtles that are kind of live in almost all environments, because you've got the land turtles, so you've got the box turtles, and then you've got the tortoises, you've got the freshwater turtles that live in ponds and rivers and lakes, and then you've got sea turtles that live in the ocean. And you'll find sea turtles in every ocean other than the Arctic oceans, because they're reptiles. They don't like it when it's cold. I don't like it when it's cold. But they are all kind of designed to live in their own kind of areas. And so with sea turtles, they have salt glands located behind their eyes, and that's what allows them to live in salt water. Because every time they go to grab a piece of food or really open their mouth, they end up swallowing a little bit of salt water. So those salt glands pull the salts out of the water, and then they have very, very salty tears. That's why you may hear of sea turtles when they're nesting, it looks like they're crying. And folklore says that they're crying because they're never going to see those babies again. But they're not true tears from emotion. They're trying to just expel the salt. Any animal that lives in the ocean has some method of dealing with salt, whether it's salty tears, salty pee, something.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, Teresa, and for answering all our questions and showing us around the turtle hospital and the turtles that are there. We did get a lot more questions than we could answer in our time slot, unfortunately. So where could students go to get more information about the turtle hospital and what you guys are doing there?
Well, you could always go online to our website. It's super difficult. It's turtlehospital.org. Especially with all of our patients, we try to keep that updated with what's kind of going on. We've had a lot of people lately being very interested in Chomper, because that was a really big deal, because that was a 14-pound tumor. But then we also have our Facebook page. That we do a lot more kind of like live feed sort of things. So we try to do little updates with our turtles in real time about our patients, but also with some of the treatments and things that we're doing. So sometimes we'll live stream some of our surgeries, or when they're getting their meds or wound care, things like that, because that gives everybody a chance to kind of see exactly what goes on around here. And it's kind of fascinating. It's not every day you get to see sea turtle surgery.
That's awesome. I will most definitely be checking that out. And I'm sure based on our chat here, a lot of the students tuning in are going to be doing the same. Thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to us today. That was amazing.
You're welcome. We love teaching people about turtles.
All right, I'm going to bring up our classes to say bye, but thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks, everybody.
Wait, bye, guys. Wait, bye.